So this is our lecture for chapter 50, which deals with sensory and motor mechanisms. So you have a lot of sensory receptors in your body that sense all kinds of things. Mechanoreceptors are anything mechanical, physical stimuli, pressure, touch, stretching, motion, sound, even could be wind on your skin. Thermoreceptors detect heat and cold. Chemoreceptors transmit solution concentration information, your sense of smell in your stomach. Electromagnetic receptors detect electromagnetic radiation, energy, light, electricity, magnetism. Those are probably the coolest ones because I think those are the ones people are most unaware of, is their electromagnetic receptors. So they say anytime you get goose pimples or goosebumps, or your hair on your hands or your arms stand up, that's because you're sensing electromagnetic radiation. And then pain receptors respond to heat, pressure, chemicals that shouldn't be there. So the antenna, for example, of male silkworms have hairs that are sensitive to sex pheromones. That's an example of a chemoreceptor. Rattlesnake have receptors on their tongues, which help them detect heat. And some migrating mammals sense Earth's magnetic field, and that's where they know where to go. So reception is detection of a stimulus. Perception is processing that information. So a sensation is any action potential reaching the brain via sensory neurons. So you receive signals and then you perceive signals using your brain. Your human ear, for example, is a very good receptor. It obviously receives sound, but it also has a role in your dizziness and in your ability to be stable. There's obviously bones in your ears. There's things that vibrate in your ear. That's how you hear sounds. And so your ear is going to go ahead and absorb all those signals. Your equilibrium, again, is also controlled by your inner ear. There's something called semicircular canals that are fluid-filled chambers that detect your head movements. And they kind of help your body keep track of where your head is, if that makes sense. So if you get dizzy spells, or if you ever get dizzy on a ride, it's because the liquid in the chambers of your ear is uneven. So your body kind of doesn't know where your head is in respect to your body. So it's kind of interesting. So that's kind of where all that comes from. Your eye, again, is another type of receptor. The human eye is very interesting. It is fluid-filled sac, but it has some nice protection on it. It has lenses, pupils, all those kind of things, cornea, and the optic nerve is what kind of connects it all to your brain. So we have something called compound eyes, where several thousand detectors help figure out where things are. We have things called rods and cones. The rods sense light, the cones sense color. So the rods just kind of tell us light from dark, shading. The cones help us color. So they say very young babies, newborn babies, can't really see color as much. It's because their rods are developed quicker than their cones. So they have rods in their eyes that are detecting the shade and the light, but the cones aren't developed yet enough to detect actual color. And rhodopsin is a light-absorbing pigment that triggers signals in this pathway that tell your brain what you're seeing. You can have hydrostatic skeletons, exoskeletons, endoskeletons. So hydro, that kind of term in that is water. So hydrostatic skeletons are fluid held under pressure. These are hydra, nematodes, annelids, kind of very aquatic organisms. Exoskeletons are hard encasements on the surface. Insects are perfect examples of exoskeletons. Mollusks, crustaceans with their shells are another example. And endoskeletons are hard supporting elements, are in the soft tissue. Human bodies, mammals, they all have endoskeletons. So you can see our skeleton here. Remember that your body is basically a bag of fluid held in place by these bones, these hard skeletons that keep things moving. Your muscles always contract. They contract or they relax, and the contraction is what moves it. They work in antagonistic pairs, meaning if you're going to move your arm up, one muscle is contracting. If you're moving it back down, another muscle, an opposite muscle, is contracting. So your biceps and your triceps are an example. So if you make kind of like a muscle, like you're shown to the gun show, the way you're doing that is your bicep contracts to pull it up, and then your tricep contracts to pull it back down. So your muscles are always contracting to move your body. And it's the same kind of thing in grasshoppers, which are interesting. Vertebrates kind of have the same muscle structure. There's 3 types of skeletal muscle, or 3 types of muscle. They're always attached to bones by tendons. You have your smooth muscle, which just makes up internal organs. Cardiac is exclusive to your heart. And skeletal is all that moving of your muscle, your bones, running, all that kind of thing. One long fiber is a single muscle cell. Muscle cells are very fibrous, meaning they're very long strings. Each muscle fiber is made up of a bunch of myofibrils, which are composed by actin and myosin. Think of it like straws. If you take straws and kind of bunch them together, the actinin would be thin straws, kind of like coffee straws, and the myosin would be normal drinking thick straws. A sarcomere is a basic contractile unit of a muscle. The Z lines help border the muscle. The I lines are thin actin filaments, and the A band are the thick actin filaments. And what happens is the sarcomere relaxes, the actin and myosin overlap, and then contracting by the motor neuron makes the length of the sarcomere reduce. The actin slides over the myosin. Fully contracted, the actin and myosin are completely overlapped. Think of it as a thick, thin sliding past each other. They don't shorten, they just move kind of like straws. Like you're going to have, for example, coffee straws intertwined with drinking straws. You move the coffee straws out, you move the coffee straws back in. Muscle fibers only contract when they're stimulated by a motor neuron. So you see the motor neuron right here. This is going to tell this muscle fiber to contract. So if you're running, you're breathing, you're doing whatever you need your muscles to do, that motor neuron's getting the signal from your brain to do that action. If you get a cramp, that motor neuron is firing when it should not. So if you get, for example, a leg cramp in the middle of the night, one of those really bad leg cramps, what's happening is usually it's your sodium, potassium, your dehydration levels off, and that motor neuron will fire, and a group of muscle cells will contract when you don't want them to, and then it hurts. So you see it here, the synaptic terminal of the motor neuron releases acetylcholine, kind of like your fight or flight one. The muscle fiber depolarizes, releases calcium ions, and initiates the sliding of the filaments, and then the muscle will contract. The depolarization of the muscles releases calcium, binds the troponin, and exposes myosin sites, and then they're going to slide past each other. You're going to get a cross bridge forming. This is all kind of the in and out of exactly how a muscle contracts. It's a very chemical ATP oriented. Remember, the ATP is the energy, so the ATP really is important here in how you're going to dissolve, how you're going to energize this whole process. The speed of muscle fibers differs a little bit. Fast fibers are brief, rapid, powerful contractions. Slow fibers are long contractions like your posture. So, for example, blinking is a very quick, brief, rapid contraction. That would be a fast fiber. Holding your head up and holding yourself up would be a slow fiber. Some issues with muscles and your skeleton and all those kind of this part of your body. ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, is kind of came into the light here in recent years with that ice bucket challenge. This is degeneration of the motor neurons, the muscles atrophy, and eventually it's a degenerative disease, so over time your muscles start to atrophy more and more and more and more, and then you have less movement of your entire body. Botulism is the block release of acetylcholine paralyzes the muscles. So botulism is actually a germ, it's a disease, but we have learned to synthesize it and we use it to do Botox. So if you're gonna, you don't want your face to be wrinkly or crinkly, you can inject Botox, which is gonna paralyze, the muscles in your face. Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder that produces antibodies to acetylcholine, so that whole process is interrupted. Calcium deficiency causes spasms and cramps, so if you're not drinking enough milk, this can cause some spasming of your body. Rigor mortis after death, obviously you're dead, you're not eating any food, you don't have any more ATP, so what happens is the actin and myosin bonds break, and you get a sustained muscle contraction. So actually, your body's in a constant, every muscle in your body contracts. That's called rigor mortis. That's why your body gets very stiff right after death. But what happens is the longer you're dead, all that stuff starts to break down and your body will relax again after that. And that concludes this lecture.